Good evening.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi there.
Hello.
There's Riva. Let's see here. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Recording in progress.
It's almost time to start, and everyone's pouring in here at the last moment, which is awesome. If you haven't yet, mute yourself. And it's up to you whether you want to use video or not. But hopefully our roundtable folks will use video when it's time. I think Jay Bailey, you're the only one not on video yet.
I am not able to.
All right, good to know. We missed your face, Jay.
I'm working on eventually being able to, but it's not yet.
All right. All right, since it's 7:01, the presenters in our order that we have here, which is hiding. Gosh, all right. So the order is going to be Riva, Jay, Ivy, Ted, Ray, and myself, Erica. So if we just want to give a minute introduction to who we are, starting with Riva.
Hi, I'm Riva Siebold, a former board member. I live in central Vermont. I came to this at the age of 50. I've had Belgians, small Belgians, big Belgians, and half Suffolk, half carriage. I play at it, though I love to teach people how to drive. I do basically now a little logging for personal uses and some carriage driving, and I used to do a little more farm work.
And you've got that lifetime horse background behind that.
Right. Lots of natural horsemanship.
Yeah. And then Jay.
My wife and I moved to Brattleboro 45 years ago. Got horses a year or two after that, and I was new to it then, but since then we farmed 40 acres with the horses, done a myriad of things, but draft horse workshops has been one of the big things. I don't know. I mean,
Well, and you've bred and trained your own, right?
yes, we've had more than 40 foals over the years, Suffolk punches. We've never, we got the first ones the summer of 1980, and I guess we did buy one or two horses in over the years, but most everything else was raised from here, and then we sold most of the others, or all the others. So around New England, there are many horses that came from here, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you. Ivy.
Hi, my name's Ivy Pagliari, and I live in Vermont also at the other end of the state. And I came to Oxen by working on a dairy farm and thinking, well, this is quite cool. What else do people do with bovines? And as oxen are the gateway drug, I then worked at Tillers International in Michigan for 4 years with oxen and draft horses. And now I'm back in Vermont with my team of milking shorthorns. And we kind of hobby farm. We go to some demonstrations, we get the firewood, just anything that we can do. And it's really nice to be here with everybody.
Thank you, Ivy. Ted.
I live in Sudbury, Vermont, and I live on the farm that was my great-great-grandfather's. And I got my first horse that belonged to me when I was 12. And I'm 70 now, so I've had them a long time. And I got my first team of drafts, or finally put 2 horses together in about 1977. And I've always used them on the farm, but I say that I'm retired now from anything that makes any money. So I still use them on the farm, but it's mostly just to put up our own hay and work in the garden and that kind of thing.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, Ted.
Have raised foals and trained animals over the years as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And Ray.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ray. One of the board members on the board. I live in central New Hampshire, work at Sanborn Mills Farm, the farm manager there. Grew up in Indiana, so I'm a transplant out here. We had a family farm out there, so farming's always been in my background. And coming out to New England, my daughter kind of got us involved in cattle pulling, so that's where my beginning became with cattle. I've got saddle horse experience and then some driving experience later on, but cattle started out pulling, and then we morphed into using them on the farm and pulling out logs and logging and firewood, and well, that's where we are. So
Thanks, Ray. I'm Erica Marzak, for those that don't know me. I grew up in upstate New York, north of 90. I started working with horses when I was 7, in lesson programs, and then I had Friends with Horses and 4-H, therapeutic riding program. I did take every draft opportunity. I did. I have a degree from Morrisville College in equine science, and then I kind of didn't do much for them for many years until somebody told me about a little workshop in Teignmouth, Vermont, where Carl Russell and Lisa McCrory were doing a workshop, and I got on the list. And the next year I went to the first Northeast Animal Powered Field Days in Tunbridge, and pretty much been addicted ever since. I got my first pair of calves in 2009 and trained a pair of beef orphans, had milking shorthorns after that, and bought my first pony in a midlife crisis, and have bred my own team of mares that I'm training and moving along fairly well. And I farmed for 7 years with oxen and a herd of percherons. I have 17 years market gardening experience. So that's what I've done with draft animals. And I want to thank everybody for coming. And I believe everyone's got themselves muted. And excellent. Or maybe Lizzie, are you muted? It's not showing on this. Let's double check. All right. So we're here to talk about keeping our emotions in check as the human element in this relationship. We're the leaders, and we're responsible for directing and the overall well-being of everyone involved in our human and draft animal relationships. And so I put this DAPChat together so that we can have a nice open discussion about how we conduct ourselves and work around our animals, which a lot of involves keeping ourselves in check. So we'll start with the first question, which is, how do you prepare yourself to work with animals? How do you remain present and grounded while working with your animals? It's kind of a two-part question. And we'll try to keep it to 1 to 3 minutes each. And if there's a follow-up before the next question, I'll check when we're all done here. Riva, do you want to start us off?
The answer is poorly. I try to, when I start the day, I try to center but I often get in my head and have excuse me, an idea of what I want to do, which is not the way to do it, because then the end point gets more important than the process. But usually pretty quickly my horses go, whoa, wait a second. And I ratchet back down and go, okay, we got to center and do this. So I don't practice my own medicine. I think the most important thing that I could say is don't have a time in which you have to be done, because that is always the day the horse makes a decision that you have to spend all day working with. So I'd say the most important thing would be don't have an end time. And if you have an end time, set it up so that you don't have, that you can stop before the end time in case, for example, you've got a pain in the ass horse going back to the barn, because you can't walk away from what's going on. That 2 or 3 minutes.
Great. And next is Jay.
In terms of preparing my mind, I'm going to fill in a little more. For about 20 years, we kept a stallion. Always kept him with the mares. And by golly, he works like everybody else. The bargain that I make with animals that I work with, or I guess any being, would be treat me with respect. I will treat you with respect. Do not be disrespectful to anybody else, me or anyone else in the barn. I have strong emotions and I need to be careful with them. But that is, if they all know, the animals all know that no one's going to bother them, they're much less apt to feel threatened and try to go after somebody else. And that's, to me, that's paramount. They are far too big and too strong to not be respectful. And it seems to work. That's what fascinates me, and why I'm still doing it and love it after however long this has been. So,
Thank you. Oh, Owen, go ahead.
Well, did that actually address the issue?
I think so. Yeah, you established that respect, mutual respect. There was the part about like while you're working, how do you maybe?
I stay focused. I work to stay focused on what does the animal need to hear next in order to do the. Your mind has to be 2 or 3 steps ahead, but you can't give commands 2 or 3 steps ahead. You've got to be focused on, in my experience, on what does the animal or the team need to do next? What is the next thing they need to do? So if I'm focused on that, then I'm less apt to get panicked or go off in other directions that aren't particularly helpful. And Riva was right on with be careful about time limits. Because as she said, sure as shooting, you'll have a limit and want to get something done, and that is a setup for trouble and not getting the things done that you want, and going places you don't want to have to go.
Great, thank you, Jay. Ivy.
You put me after somebody who's been doing this longer than I've been alive. But my answer to this question is to try and be as prepared as I can be, and to try and set myself and the animals up for success. Are these new animals that I don't know very well? Then maybe I'm going to leave the halters on them and make sure that, you know, I can reach the rope for that off ox. Or is it going to be icy? Well, maybe I'll go look at the road before I take them down the road with the log sled. And if it is icy, I'll put some ashes on the forecart and try and, you know, be ready for that. I worked with a team of horses one time that were very nice, but I don't think they'd been in the woods very much, and they were a little bit twitchy in the woods. And so the first couple times that we went, I tried to go out before and, you know, make sure the logs were in an easy position and maybe put the choker chains on the logs first. And, you know, just kind of set everybody up for success, which you won't always have, and that's why we're all here. But if you can stack the deck in your favor, I think it doesn't hurt.
Great, thank you. Ted.
Yes. Well, when Erica asked me if I wanted to do this, I thought that she meant, do you want to participate and learn how to control your emotions? I didn't realize that she meant for me to be a presenter. But here I am. And then I didn't get this list of questions ahead of time, so I haven't thought about it. And as I mentioned, I've been doing it for 50 years. And so I don't feel like I haven't consciously thought about it a lot. But having said all that, one thing that I say to people when this subject comes up is that horses will teach you patience if you let them, if you're open to learning and growing with the horse. And even though I've been doing it for a long time, I still feel that way. And it's still what I love about working with the horses, even with my team that I've been using for years. When I go out, it still feels like we're training, you know, we're trying to learn some new little thing, step over better, whatever it is. And so that's what keeps me interested. And I can't say that I think by nature, I don't have a big problem with my emotions getting out of check. It's just not the way I'm made, or maybe the horses have taught me that. I don't know. But I did, someone else said this, and it made sense to me that I recognize it as something that happens with me, that you need to gauge your energy according to the horses. In other words, if their energy level is really high, they're really flighty and they're nervous, then your energy has to go way down and be very calm and very relaxed. And so that's something you consciously need to do. And the opposite end, you know, if they're ignoring you and they're totally flicking their cigarette in your face or whatever, then you have to be able to raise your energy level to meet the situation. And so I guess that's something that I'm always working on, is matching my energy level, my emotional level to the situation, to what's required in the situation. And I really, you'll notice that now it's coming out 3 times already about not having a deadline, a time limit with horses. They just don't care about your time limits, and breaking it down into small enough pieces so that, you know, you're not up against something where you're setting yourself up to try to do more than the horses are ready to do in the time allowed. I really relate to what the other people said about that. Okay.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, I realize it's my fault. I didn't have your correct email address to prep you in time, and I apologize for that. But your words are priceless, and we really appreciate you being here. Ray.
Okay, well, I guess the first thing I would say is I'm a repetitive person. I like to do things the same as much as I can. So when I get the cattle out, I bring them out the same, I tie them the same, I brush them, get them all ready. That puts my mind at ease. It puts me into the position to know that we're working. It puts them into the position to know they're working. I yoke the same way every time. And just like Ted said, matching your attitude to their attitude and knowing when to amp it up and when not to. And that's really, really important with cattle. I run Devons, so you've got to, like Jay said, 4 steps ahead of them. You're thinking of all the wrecks that's going to happen, that you're already planning in your mind to set yourself at ease. So repetition, getting my mind at ease, getting out there and starting the job. And just like everybody said too, is time. You put a time limit on yourself. You know that's when they're gonna do something stupid. You're gonna end up out there until 9 o'clock at night, making them come back and do what you want and put them away happy. So I would say my key is repetition, setting myself up for success, sets them up for success, and just everybody being happy.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray. I myself, you know, you kind of have to, I have the luxury of not having much work for my animals right now. So if I'm too tired, if I'm stressed about something, I can opt to say not right now. And so if you have the luxury of time and not an immediate job or task that has to get done, definitely I check in with myself that way. And so when I do feel up to it, because right now I'm working in Florida, I have a seasonal job working nights. And so the sleep deprivation is a real problem. So I really need to be in the right mind to work with my horses. I have a young 3-year-old that I've started double, driving single, and recently started riding. So I need to be on my game. So I make sure that I'm ready for working with them. And then routine is everything. When I'm brushing them, grooming them, I'm getting to put my hands on them and checking in with them, seeing how responsive they are, you know, are they paying attention, and just kind of connect with them then. Like, you know, we're not trying to graze while we're being brushed. You know, you need to pay attention. You're working now, and just sort of, you know, massage them into the mindset like, oh, okay, I'm on the clock now, and we need to pay attention. We need to move over, so I start, you know, the moment I go out to catch them, I'm starting to just get a feel for where they are, where I am, and how I can match their energy. And while I'm working,
remind everyone. Yes, don't holler. Yes, don't holler.
Thank you for muting. Anyway, so while I'm working my animals, I'm checking in with them, making sure they're paying attention, giving them rests. You know, I need to respect, you know, if it's a 90-degree day and we're out cultimulching or doing something kind of heavy and strenuous, I make sure that I give them regular, consistent breaks so that they can look forward to that. And I even have them so that hopefully they're looking forward to that next break, and then they can manure not in the crops with vegetables is really important. So I really try to get a good routine of regular breaks, even if they're just a short half minute. Sometimes it'll be 5 minutes in the shade, but they know that it's not going to be too awful long till we get just a pause anyway. And so they're looking for that, so we can, rather than getting upset about, you know, the continuous strain or whatever, they know that they can count on me to give them a break. So that kind of keeps our energy level in the field. And looking ahead is as important, as others have said. And if I have to, if I really need to work on getting grounded, I mean, there's nothing wrong with breathing and counting to 10. That if you have that luxury of that time, if everyone's giving you a moment, so you can recoup. Otherwise, you just have to do your best. So we'll go on. I see a
Erica?
question. We'll do that later. Yes.
Could I just add a little
Sure.
bit
Yeah.
to what I said?
Yes, I was going to offer if any of the 6 of us have a follow-up. Go ahead, Jay.
Several have talked about repetition or routine, and starting from half an hour old, I work with every animal to make sure that they are comfortable with me around them, and that there will be times when I ask them, and by asking I mean something like, friends are encouraged to do whatever it is that I'm asking. I have to, it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm not asking something they can't do. It has to be possible. And yes, that's been a, I've had to learn that. It doesn't work to ask them to do things they can't do. And so just making sure that you're always evaluating. But then routines, but I have routines, and there are some things that never change, but there are other things that I work with them to accept, to be used to things in different places. I'm going to do it. We're going to go around the other way this time. You need to listen to me. You have to listen to me. You have to be paying attention to me. And as long as you're doing that, and as long as you're trying, that's good. And as long as they're trying, I have to make sure that I'm paying attention to that, and acknowledging that they're trying, and that they accomplish something when they do, even if it isn't much. If they tried and got somewhere, or didn't let something happen, that's great. And I want to make sure that I let them know that. I think that's
great.
probably more than enough.
Well, I'll follow up with the they have to be able to do something they know how and understand, and along with Ted, combined with that, like constantly training mode, can you step your hind end over a little better so the pole doesn't hit you, and just all these little subtle things while we're going along. And if the animals don't execute it well or right, I always remember to give them the grace that maybe they didn't understand me well. Let me try to ask that in a better way. Because they might be confused or frustrated or distracted or something. So I slow down and try to find a better way for them to understand what I need. And we might have to work on it. They might just be like, oh yes, we're slowing down. Okay, now this seems more familiar, and we can do it well. And I will say with the time thing, for sure, don't have time expectations, but the more you do it, the more likely you could perhaps stick to somewhat of a schedule. If you're going out every day with the same team, things will generally be more timely. So the more miles, the more you do it, in theory, the easier it could be. So, any other follow-ups from the presenters? Seeing none, we'll go to the second question. You have important work to do today and time is tight. How do you handle a situation which needs and deserves more time than you have? So something, you know, you're in a working situation and yeah, there's been a flub and you've got to address something. How do you handle that? Riva.
So there's an old Buddhist expression about the less time you have, the slower you go. And I think that the big mistake I've made in the past is not do my safety checks because I'm in a hurry and I'm focused on what's going to happen next. And my equipment safety checks and my harness safety checks, I will skip, and I've gotten in trouble with that before. And the other thing is, what somebody mentioned earlier, is break it down into pieces so that I can take that anxiety part of me can say, okay, well, we've done this part. And then I can work through the pieces. In other words, don't cut corners, which is what the temptation to do is, because you get in trouble every time with the animals when you cut corners. I think what else? In terms of my own anxiety, if I'm, you know, really under pressure to get it done, just remember that my mind is telling me I have to get it done, but the end of the world won't come, and safety and my horses are more important than whatever it is I think I have to get done. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Jay?
Ditto. I like Riva. I like it. The thing that I think she said it, but I would say directly would be, look at the time that you have and pick what you think you can reasonably get done, allowing for being able to do a little more perhaps if you have time, but if it's too much to do, don't try to. And as Riva said, and I'm sure anybody, you know, if you've done very much, you've gotten into a situation where you tried to do more than you could, than was reasonable, and it's not worth it. The animals are they're too dear to us. I mean, if something happens, what are you going to do? It's not worth going there. So find ways to make it reasonable, and then do, like Riva said, do your safety checks. Okay. That covers it as best I can.
Thank you, Jay. Ivy.
I mean, everything that Jay and Riva said is what I was gonna say. The thing that I wrote was, don't get in a fight you can't win. That, you know, something has happened and it's totally okay to, you know, take a deep breath, remind yourself that the sled broke and you're going to come back tomorrow and get it. And it's very unlikely that anyone will die due to this situation, even though it would be great if the sled came back today. But if the sled has to sit in the neighbor's field, it's going to be all right. And, you know, if you have to you know, if you have to let something slide so that you can come back and work on it later, that's okay, you know, as long as it's in my head as, all right, like this is something that we're gonna work on. So hopefully we can avoid this in the future. But it's worth it to, you know, like Jay was saying, like the animals are so important and their safety is important, and so is your safety. And so it's not worth it to get in a situation that's dangerous for any of you.
Thank you, Ivy. Ted?
Yeah, I had the same feeling that Riva covered it really well. And the thing about that, if you start trying to hurry, you're going to end up getting less done. Somebody in the chat put in, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get, which is a pretty good way of saying it. And I did have the thought that it depends a little bit if we're talking about horses in training or horses maybe that are flighty, as opposed to a good old steady team that you can say, guys, we've got to be on our best today. You know, we've got to really hit it. You can maybe do that with a team that you work with every day and that you're a really good team. And that can feel great at the end of the day when you get an unusual amount done. But that's very different than if you're talking about green horses or horses that maybe have issues, you know, then you've got to be careful. And that's the most important thing. And you will all still be here tomorrow, just like Riva said. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Ray?
I think one of my biggest problems is I put way too much expectation on the amount of work that I think I'm going to get done. If I cut that in half and then I get more than half done, then I've really, really done a good job then. I think that's the biggest battle I have. And I would say putting a time limit on working cattle or horses is really kind of tricky because, you know, each and every time we go out is a training session. It's either training for me or training for them. If something's going bad and we go back to the barn and we put a bad note in their head, then we get something to work on even harder next time. So I would say when I go to do work is trying to cut my expectations in half and getting done what I get done, because we're not lives. So it'll be there tomorrow too. So.
Thank you, Ray. Yeah, the comments in the chat, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. My mentor had said fast is slow and slow is fast. And so I have ADHD and I can skip over things pretty easily, just being multiple steps ahead of myself. And so I've always used, I look for little hints that I leave myself. If I'm getting ready to hook up to a 4-car implement, whatever, to go over to my field, and I notice that I forgot to put a cross track through a ham ring, or there's a curb chain loose, or I forgot the jockey yokes. Halt. Doesn't matter how tight I am for time, I'm not paying attention to something. So I fix that thing. I totally recheck everything else, might even find something else, might not. And I just slow it down. And I find as soon as I recognize that I'm in a hurry and I just slow it down, you know, the horses respond to that, I respond to that, and suddenly the work's getting done. And it's the same, you know, we're out in the field, somebody's getting frustrated, I don't have any bug spray left, and we'll just take the time to go take a break, sit in the shade or whatever, and I'll swat flies off of them and just give them a moment. But I find every time I'm in a tight situation, when I can, if I can just slow down, things go much faster after that. Or not much faster, but they you know, things work out if I take that time in the moment to slow down. And that seems to help me. And again, yeah, your animals are not worth starting a fight you can't win. So that's just what I do for myself. Any follow-up thoughts from the panel?
I'll chime in on what Ray said, that I've over the years realized that I always think that can get a lot more done than I can. And so something that's maybe helped with age is realizing that yeah, you think, but you're probably not going to get, just like Ray said, so that you accept that you're not going to get as much done as you thought you were, because that's just the way you are. You think it's going to go faster than it is. So that helps you relax a little bit.
Here, here.
I'll add too that once in a while you're in a pinch and things just fall into place. There's a storm coming. You've got to get those last, few rows cultivated, and the horses sense that storm coming, and you just suddenly it's done, and you're back to the barn, and you can pat yourselves on the back, and it doesn't always work out that well, but sometimes in a pinch, when everybody's in the right mind, you can do some amazing things, but know when to stop and know when to keep going. All right. Third question: how do you approach work when you're having a bad day or the animals are having a bad day? Riva.
This going first is interesting. First, to forgive myself for all the judgments that are yelling at me that I'm, fill in the blank, whatever. To forgive myself for the bad day. Usually the problem is the bad day started before I started the horses. And I sort of say, oh, I'm fine, and I keep on going. And then I get farther in with the horses and I realize I'm not fine. So then I judge myself for having, judge myself for judging myself. So working on letting go of the judgments. Quit. Find something positive that you can quit on. And for example, if you have a really bad day and have a wreck, be sure that you have friends or folks that can be with you when you come back and visit it if you need it. Not be ashamed to ask for help. Come back and visit it so that the natural anxiety, fear from having had a really bad day, that you get some support for. So from just having a little bad day, let go of the judgments, quit when you're ahead, and when you have a really bad day, get some help to come back and work through your fear. That's it.
Thank you. Jay.
I guess I would go back to what I said and what a couple of others have said. Just I try to focus on what do they need to do? What do they need to hear? What in order to get whatever the next thing, what is the next step? What do they need to hear in order to do that? And that that helps me to be able to shut out the pressure of, oh, I've got to get something XYZ done. Focus on what is the next thing. At least for me, that's how I would approach it. And the question of addressing fears from something that has happened. Expanding a bit on what Riva said, which is get some help. Yes, absolutely, get help. But that is just it seems to me, just part of setting yourself up and the horses or the oxen to succeed the next time. And often that will mean breaking the chore, whatever it is that needs to be done, down into small pieces, so that you're not trying to go back and do the whole whatever it was that didn't go well. You're not trying to do the whole thing. You do one part of it, then you do another part of it, and then you do a third part of it, and then you maybe put those three parts together, and then you add some other piece of the puzzle. And then when those are all functioning the way you want, then you work at putting larger groups of those small pieces together. And that seems to help. Well, that's the way I approach training too. Because that's, I guess, what we would be doing after something that didn't go well, is retraining. Anyway, I think that covers for me.
Thank you, Jay. And before Ivy goes, we're sort of at the time we're supposed to start question and answer. We're only halfway through. So the next round, just so our presenters are prepared, we'll do the next round. You can answer question 4 or 5. So either the aha moment or when you find yourself in an intense situation. And we just need to maybe pick the pace up a little here so that folks have the opportunity to have questions answered or share stories. So Ivy.
So I think sometimes if I notice that I'm having a bad day, I try and pick something maybe not very difficult to do. Like, you know, we always put the manure on the sled and go take it to the manure pile. Like this seems like an easy win. And maybe this isn't the day that we try and pull the giant heavy thing through the 2.5 feet of snow, because that might be more of a challenge. So then you did something fun with your animals and it was successful, which feels pretty good. And that sometimes helps me when I'm having a bad day, and the animals were successful as well.
Excellent, thank you. Ted.
Well, you were very wise putting Riva first. She does a very succinct job of answering these questions. So I'll just give a little tangent that when I'm having a bad day, a lot of times my first thought is I need a horse fix. And so I go and do something with my horses to make it a better day. And that usually works, because when I'm with my horses, I try to be really present and focused, and all that other stuff goes away, usually. So that's what I do when I'm having a bad day. I go and play with my horses, and we do something that brings me back to earth.
Thank you, Ted. Ray.
So I'll agree with that definitely, because we're supposed to be having fun. So I've come home from work at times and yoked up and taken off into the woods and find that I'm picking more fights than I am anything else. So we end up just going for a long walk, or I hand the stick off. I've been in before where we're cultivating and I'm a little too amped up, or I'm too nerved up, and you know, the guy's stepping on things and it's just making it worse. So having somebody there to hand a stick to, or just stop, go for a nice long walk, do something that's fun with them, and have something that's accomplishing rather than picking fights.
Thanks, Ray. In the training situation I find myself in, totally agree with Ted and Ray. But there was a point in my life where I needed to be timely and methodical, and I had a big burden of work to do with the animals for a living. and I was in the midst of a strained relationship, which sometimes horses were the focal point. So I really had, you know, I had stuff to do. I had to get it done, and I wasn't in the best mindset. But thankfully, it was a 3/4 mile drive from the barn to my field. So I had 3/4 of a mile to talk through the lines, or walk along, or ride in the cart with the oxen. And so I had 3/4 of a mile to get my act together and be a better person for these animals while we went off to do our work. And so, so I had that time to regain some grace, and I was very grateful for that. And when the horses are having, or the animals are having a bad day, the first question is why. And so I'll check that animal over for any injuries, tack fit, you know, what's wrong, what's going on. We had one mare one time that, oh boy, for a whole week we swapped sides, we tried readjusting stuff, and she just wasn't comfortable, and she was rammy, and she was going forward. And, well, we got ready to bring her to the field days up in the Northeast Kingdom, and I went to Roach Maine, and she had a $50 size fester under 2 inches of mane that had to get roached right under her collar. And it wasn't something you could feel until you removed all that hair and saw this giant fester. So we brought a pair of geldings instead. So sometimes what's wrong is internal or not obvious, and always remember to ask why. Why are the horses or the cattle having a bad day? So give them that grace and respect. So the next question can either be, when you find yourself in an intense situation, like a tangle breakdown or runaway, how do you work to manage the situation the best that you can? Or what is an aha moment that you've experienced that has changed the way you take responsibility for yourself when you're working with your animals? Pick one and go. Riva.
I'm drawing a blank on both of them and would rather just let people have their own questions after. So I'll pass.
Sure, yeah. Or you can follow up later. Jay, you're on the spot.
I would say in a tight situation, what I've said several times, what is the next thing that needs to happen? What do I need to do next? What do they need to do next? And I had a horse fall over down a bank in harness in deep snow, a couple feet of snow. And what do you do? I was alone. I mean, got them unhooked. They were trusting and didn't get wild, which is wonderful. But I was able to get them unhooked and back up and up the bank and drove them out. I think whatever I was pulling, I left there for the time being and then came back and got it later. But anyway, one step at a time.
Great. Ivy?
I'll say that my aha moment was the idea that I could try something and see what happened. I've been trying to teach my cattle some different things that I didn't teach them when they were young, and I felt all this pressure. What if I do it and it doesn't work? What if I try it and, you know, something I can't get them to do these things? And I sort of came to the conclusion that, well, so what? They don't do it now. If you try it and it doesn't work, well, that's okay. You can try something else. And that really took the pressure off me, and, you know, feeling like I really need them to do this thing, or else what? There really isn't, you know, it wasn't a high stakes situation. So either they'll figure it out and that'll be great, or they won't figure it out and we'll try something else. And that really has allowed us to try a lot of different things that we haven't been trying in the past. And it's been great.
Thank you, Ivy. Ted.
Well, an aha moment, a couple of things came to mind. One for me was doing a natural horsemanship clinic. Like I said, I started out with horses in the 50s, and I don't know if the term had been invented yet of natural horsemanship, but so I discovered it at some point, and I did a John Lyons clinic maybe in the 80s. And that was kind of an aha moment for me. So I'd encourage anyone to, now with the internet, you know, there's lots of opportunities to do that, and a lot of information out there to be gotten that way. And it did give me some great help. So that would be an aha moment for me, if that counts. Oh, and the other thought I had was a round pen. Again, in the 50s, I don't know if anybody around here had ever heard of a round pen, but I hadn't. But when I got a round pen, I was really pleased with how much I could do in that round pen with a horse. And, you know, I don't think you need to own one. I think there's enough of them out there now that you could take your horse somewhere and spend some time using him in a round pen. And boy, I'm just amazed at how much help it is to be able to do the join up and the things that you can do in a round pen.
Thank you, Ted. Ray?
I'll answer these two questions quickly. As far as keeping calm during a wreck or anything like that, is I'll go back to the training. Is every time I'm out, I try to anticipate things that are going to go wrong and try to think of that. So you're kind of mentally prepared for those breakdowns. Whether you got to pull the bow pin out to drop a bow, or whether you got to do something desperate as cut the yoke in half or whatever, you just kind of go through these things in your head and trying to stay calm, trying to think it through, and having somebody know where you are. I find that's very helpful too.
Yeah.
Now the aha moment. I took a workshop. Like I said, I came from the pulling world. I took a workshop at Sanborn Mills Farms. I wanted to learn more about farming and logging with the cattle, so I went with my team. Our horse teamster there was John Slang. We went out in the woods. Never been in the woods with them. Never had them on a forecart, so they were acting very well. We got out there, you know, I'm being forceful, hooting, hawing, growling at them, getting them in there, got them hooked up, pulled that log out like it was a distance load, and away we went. I got done. I was all pleased with myself, and he came over and he looked at me and he said, "Why do you have to be so noisy? Well, don't you hear how quiet it is and how nice it is and how peaceful it is out here? And here you are hooting and hollering and yelling." He goes, "Why do you have to be so noisy?" Aha, less is more. If I can make my cattle do everything I want to do without saying one single word, that is so much more impressive to everybody and myself than hooting and hollering and growling and smacking. So there's my aha moment.
Excellent, Ray. I will second that. It's amazing what you can do in silence, like be on a conference call, DAPChat meeting while finishing your harrowing with a pair of 3-year-olds without making a sound. You just got your magic wand, and it's amazing how quiet we can be and how much work we can get done.
I've got a
regards to being in a tangle. I'm just humbled at times at how, when you can get in a tangle, these horses or cattle just once they realize you're there, once you put a hand on them and said, I'm here and I'm going to help, they just go limp and they let you take over. And not every time, but my experience has been so far, like horses falling down, a mountainside, getting tangled, getting their rear feet trapped in a round pen gate that they've collapsed on top of themselves. It's just amazing. And it's just humbling how much faith they can put into us to help them out of a situation. And my aha moment was not in the field. It was a rainy day in Connecticut, and Riva called me up and said, let's go to a movie. And we went and watched 12 Years a Slave. And on the way home, I remember thinking, making the comparison between draft animals and slavery. And I know some people believe in having dominion over their surroundings, but that day I decided that I really just wanted to be in relationship with my animals, a working relationship where they have input and I might not have to allow them to do what they might want to do at the moment, like put their heads down and eat, but they have input and I listen to them and I give them breaks and I'm fair to them. And that day I just saw my relationship with the animals a lot differently. So that was my aha moment, was going to a movie with Riva. So just a speed round here. Number 6 is resource recommendations. So if you have a book or something that might help somebody inspire a different perspective or whatnot, working with their animals. Riva.
Pass.
Okay. Jay, anything?
Well, sort of the usual suspects in terms of printed literature. There are many years of Small Farmers Journal and Rural Heritage and the Draft Horse Primer, and I assume that people know of these. There's nothing beats having somebody nearby, but I didn't have anybody, and I sort of had to figure it out, which was interesting, and it made, I tried things that weren't necessarily customary, and sometimes those really worked and worked well, and other times they didn't for good reason. But in terms of resources,
Great. Was that it, Jay? Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, yes, no, go. That's, I don't think I need to clutter more things more.
All right. Thank you so much. Ivy. She's got the best one.
I told Erica my answer and that my go-to book for your attitude about oxen is Farmer Boy, which has everyone read this book? It's a kid's book that Laura Ingles Wilder of Little House on the Prairie fame wrote about her husband growing up in upstate New York in the, I don't know, 1860s, 1870s. And he has this little team of oxen and he figures out how to train them. And at one point he gets in a wreck in the snowbank, going to get the logs in the woods. And it's so wonderful. And if you have ever trained a bovine, you should read it. Thank you.
And Almanzo also had Morgans. So if you're a horse person, there's horse stuff too. And lots of good food references. Ted.
Well, starting out for me, Maurice Telleen's Draft Horse Primer was my Bible. And I don't know of a better one having been written since. So I definitely can recommend that. But also the mentor is so helpful. And I'll give anyone who's looking for one a clue. I had a gentleman tell me he wanted to get horses and could he learn from me and could he give me any help? And I said, yeah, sure. And he would call me about once a week and say, what are you doing? And I'd say, oh, I'm cutting wood. And he'd say, can I come help you? And I would say, yeah, sure. And he just made himself like a nuisance, but helping me, whether I was working with horses or not. So that after a little while, I knew I owed him. And so I spent a lot of time with him, going with him to help him pick out his horses and everything. So I can't stress that one enough. Find someone that you think that you can learn from, and then be a nuisance if you have to, but a good nuisance that you're helping them and making it worthwhile for them to help you.
Thank you, Ted. Ray.
Well, Ivy stole my thunder. That was the exact reference I was going to use. Anybody that's read that wants to learn about cattle, that's going to put the passion right into your heart, I'll tell you. And you'll find the references and you'll find the books, you'll find the information out there. But I can't agree with Ted any more than what he said. Is a mentor as well, somebody that you can call, talk to, and bounce ideas off of. But that was the book that made me one day say, hey, I should try that ox thing. And by golly, I did.
I found it inspirational as well when I was younger. My reference, so I had the privilege of spending some time in Montana a few years ago, and I got to work with a cowboy who worked in the Great Basin. It was a short day, was only a 30-mile circle, going out to check the cattle. Sometimes it was 50, 60 miles in a day. And that man owned two books. One was the Bible, and the other was it True Horsemanship Through Feel by Bill Dorrance, and Leslie Desmond helped him write it. And the first two chapters, he kept that book for the first two chapters. There's a bunch of exercises that anybody can do, and you might even be able to apply it to cattle in a way. It's just creating that invisible connection and feel between you and the animal. It's centered on riding, but there's a lot that you could glean from the exercises, I think, from any animal or even a human. But the first two chapters, there's just super humble writing about how you need to look to the horse for the answers, and how you need to humble yourself. It's an amazing book. I probably recall there's at the time I was learning to avoid words like can't, not, shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, all the negatives, and it really changed my perspective. And I saw that a lot in Bill Dorrance's writing. He didn't tell you what you can't do. He didn't tell you what you shouldn't do. He told you what worked for him, and how he humbled himself. And it's an amazing reference for kind of keeping yourself in check. So we will put this in the chat, and we'll start to take questions. I know Barbara had a question for Jay in the chat, so we will start with that. Regarding respect, Jay, I got the impression that you were insisting that the horses respect each other too. That is, not picking on each other or intimidating each other, that you keep order in the herd. Is that part of the respect for you, or did I imagine that?
Good question. Yes, that is what I've said. What I probably should add on is particularly in the barn. And particularly when I am there, don't you dare bother somebody else. I'm not going to let anybody bother you. Don't bother someone else. outside, there's nothing I can do. Don't go there. When they're turned out, I have to figure out who I'm going to put with whom, and that sort of thing. But once they're out there, my arms aren't that long. It doesn't do any good. But in the barn, they need to know that when they are with me, when I am with them, I'm going to ask things of them, and I expect them to pay attention and try. And as long as they're doing that, then I acknowledge the effort and work on getting the results that I'm looking for. And that's somebody at a workshop once made the comment, a workshop at our place here. Well, you're training your horses all the time. And yeah, every time I handle them, I'm working on having them pay more finer attention to what I'm doing and what I'm asking them to do. Because that's the easiest time for me to train them. And it means that they are always expecting me to be giving them some kind of input, or at least they're listening for it and ready to hear it when they do. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. So we can open this up to questions. I don't know how to raise your hand.
You go
Anyone
into reactions, and there's a place where you can check raise hand.
Okay, so down on the bottom, if you go into
Down the bottom.
reactions, you can raise your hand. And okay.
So Novelina is the person who raises their hands is the top left.
Okay, so Molina, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So sorry, I've come late, but did we cover positive reinforcement? Because there is science to animal training that's come out in the last, I guess, 30 years. So there is actual proven stuff that works consistently.
Does anyone have work with positive reinforcement here? I know it's a topic that we are working on getting into our field days this coming fall. We have a couple people that aren't here that have worked with it. And I can imagine that I have applied some of that, but I'm not articulate in speaking about it.
I'll take a short stab if you want.
No, it's fine. Like, I know what it's like, but I can tell from what I've heard that it's like a new concept. So it's basically food reward. So you're making it, you're rewarding for the animals for doing the right thing. And when they do something that you don't like, you just ignore it. So that's the principle. So it is the quickest, most effective way to train animals. So you don't need to be the boss. They're always engaged with you because you've got food. So lots of positives about that method.
If
I
you
will say that
things that you like resources that deal with that, will you put them in the chat?
Yeah, so I've listed 2 books, and I'd say the Karen Pryor one is the best. So in my opinion, worth a read, but you can, I'll stick some more in as well. Thanks, Ivy.
Erica?
I know I've used what I believe is a version of that when I first brought my mare home. She was kind of the low man on the totem pole and would threaten me horribly with her body language when I went to feed her. And so slowly, day by day, I would reward her for any efforts to not have the most ugly face in the world. And eventually we built our way up to, you don't get fed until both your ears up and you're not threatening me. And so to this day, I can walk out with her feed dish, and all I have to do is just, if one ear goes back, I just have to pause, and all of a sudden, oh, ears are up, and I'm not threatening you, and then she gets fed. So it took me a while, just kind of teaching myself, but that's how I approached my mare. And I'm sure there's other little things I do that I'm just not aware of. But I thought of that example of positive reinforcement. Anybody else on positive?
I want to make a comment. We're in a little bit different situation with driving horses because we're actually not, and we're not in physical contact with them, and we're certainly not in a position to give them treats when I'm talking about when we're driving. So
well, I drive, so you train them on the ground first. So you train them all your cues using the food reward. And then when you get in the carriage, you say, walk on, and they do. And you say, you've taught them how to side pass, you taught them how to back up. So you're just giving the cues and they do it because they've already learned it. But you can let them stop and eat grass for food reward if you want.
Oh, really? While you're driving, stop and let them eat grass. That's nice. So what
They do it in Sweden, Ted.
What I was starting to say was that because we're not in physical contact with them, that I've tried to use positive reinforcement to have them recognize my saying, for instance, good boy, in this very relaxed tone, and it becomes something that they make a positive association with because I've done that on the ground, so that even when I'm behind them and I can't get in physical contact with them, they recognize that, me saying that to them, and it helps them to relax and understand that they've just done something good. So
I would second.
Yeah, how?
I would second what Ted just said, and also it's a little different form of reward, but the use of pressure and release. Pressure is any kind of request at all, and release is the removal of the pressure to do it again. And that can be a very strong tool to use. And strong probably isn't a really good word to describe it, because it can be very light, but very, very effective. And yeah, happy to talk more about it at some point if somebody wants to.
Yeah, I think with this corner of the horse industry, we're learning from a lot of old timers, and they have a lot to teach us. And there's a lot of new perspectives, new techniques that can certainly be associated or be incorporated with some of this older knowledge. And there are some people blending that well, and there are some people that have none of this formal training and just really have an amazing relationship with their horses. So there's a lot of ways that this group of people come at training. So resources for that would be, yeah, if anybody's interested in that and you had a resource to share, that'd be wonderful. I think Tim Harrigan had his hand raised at one point.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to follow up on that positive reinforcement. Of course, I think that's always our goal with how we interact. I personally have never liked the idea of food as a reward because it's just not very compatible with work, with actual work with the animals. So, and we did that at our gathering with tillers. We had quite a long session on clicker training with food as a reward, and I thought that was quite interesting. But everybody has to find their own way how they communicate with animals, and I think I don't know if it's a misperception by some people that we're quite rough with our animals, but I really don't know anyone that's really rough with their animals. I think people try to apply the least amount of pressure needed, and every animal's different. I mean, I had a team before that if, well, my motto was never miss an opportunity to keep your big mouth shut. I mean, that was my working motto. And I mean, a goad is an extension of your voice too. So it applies to a goad. Never miss an opportunity to put that thing away. But, I mean, you struggle with it because I think we go into the woods or wherever we are with a task. We want to get it done. And the team is not always quite thinking exactly the same way. They're having maybe not a great day. And, it's a type of thing where sometimes you forget that maybe you're not really the boss out there. Maybe you're just part of the team. And you need to remember that. And you need to, every time you feel yourself really wanting to start pushing and maybe getting a little frustrated or angry, you need to put it away. You need to step down a little bit. And I think as Bill mentioned, there's times when I had a bad day, and the next day I don't load them. I yoke them up. We go for a walk in the woods, and I don't say much, and we just try and relax and keep it like that. But I mean, everybody has to find their own way, I guess. There's a lot of ways to get there, and I think we all like to have a very positive relationship with our animals. So I think that's all I'll say about that.
Thanks for joining us, Tim. And Tim, everybody, is a former DAPNet vice president. Thank you for your service, Tim. I think we need to keep in perspective too that the title of this event is Keeping Our Emotions in Check, meaning something's potentially triggering us. It's not let's tell stories about our best days ever. So we're looking at how to better ourselves in less than ideal situations versus coming from the other end of it. Let's see, who's got a question or a story to share?
I'll ask a question because of what you just said. I want to hear the worst day ever from the presenters. I want to hear about the worst wreck ever and how you kept yourself in cool and how it worked out in the end with your animals.
I'll answer that. The worst day ever was about a year and a half ago, where I had my manure spreader and I had a runaway. And I think the thing that was really, nobody ended up getting really hurt other than my self-confidence and everything. We broke some stuff, but I think the thing that was most important was I'd taken a workshop from a driving person actually on what to do with a wreck. And so that when I realized through a screw up of mine, I was in a runaway, I knew what I needed to do, which was to head for the most solid thing I could run them into, and that would stop them, and to not bail if I could. The other thing that made a decision was I realized I was in a manure spreader, and when we stopped, I was going to go flying, so I bailed. And that was the worst day, and everybody was okay. I had to take get my confidence back, which is still kind of limp sometimes, but that was the worst day, and I was so grateful. And what Erica said earlier is then once they stopped and they'd run over a few trees, they just stood there and waited for me to undo it. And it was human error. I didn't do my safety check correctly. And I'm really grateful that particularly at my age, nobody got hurt, and grateful for having thought through exactly what I would do if I had that kind of runway.
Great.
I got an answer
Jay?
for that.
Yeah.
Worst day I had was getting ready in June to go out and cut the first bit of hay I was going to cut that year. And I was in a hurry, like we've been talking about. And we got hooked onto the mower up not in the usual place, but where it had been stored for the winter. And everything was hooked up all right, but one of the lines, the cross-check line on one side was hooked over something, and I didn't see it. And they started going. They were sensed my let's go, my wanting to get things done, and so they went. And they were looking for, I could see them looking for, why aren't you giving us signals with the lines? But I couldn't because one of them was caught. Luckily, they hit the mower blade was down. It hit a really solid fence post and broke the pole. And I went flying and had to get stitches in my forehead, but never mind that. The horses went with the pole still suspended between them, and I don't know, 300-400 yards, and then they stopped. But that just reinforced what everybody's been saying tonight. Take the time. My daughter says, take the time it takes so it takes less time. And that says it for me.
I'll jump in here real quick, Erica, if I could.
Sure.
I'd say one of the worst wrecks I had is we were out, it was the end of the year, we were out pulling firewood out. I had a pair of shorthorns that were about 1,600 pounds, and we were going through the woods and they were starting to act a little sloppy, and I was in a hurry, just like we've talked about. I picked a fight and they took off on me, and they took way off on me, went through the woods, chased them down. By the time I got to them, they had wrapped themselves around a couple different trees. They had everything. It was just a complete jabbled mess. And being able to get to them and pull the bow pin, and I dropped the bow. I was able to hold on to the other bull, and we got everything situated out. But I'll go back to saying again, is letting somebody know where you are too. As my kids heard the ruckus and somebody came running, and they luckily came with a halter. But again, it was time in a hurry and picking a fight, thinking that we were going to get this done in my time frame. And what should have happened is we should have stopped, and we should have went back to the barn, or we should have taken a long walk. So just remembering that, thinking through and thinking on how you're going to get out of things before they happen.
Thanks, Ray. Ted or Ivy?
I'll say that my worst day, unfortunately, it was not a wreck. It was realizing that I had bought an animal that was way too much for me. And, I'd had them for a couple weeks, so we were getting to know each other. I thought things were going okay. We were building our relationship, and my goodness, I discovered that this horse was not bashful about kicking me. And I have some mentors and I talk to them, and we continued to work on it for a little bit. And, you know, I had to admit that, you know, for the safety of everyone, I need to find a new home for these animals. And that's what I did. But it certainly was really hard on my ego. And I think, you know, what I could take away from that situation was you need to let your ego go, and you want to do what is best for the animals, and you want to do what is best for yourself. And, you know, sometimes it's admitting that you need somebody else to handle this. And so that's what I did. And, you know, ultimately it all turned out okay, but certainly I felt both physically and psychologically terrible for quite a while. But, you know, being able to come out of it and say, you know, the race is long, and in the end, it's only with yourself, has been really beneficial for me. So I appreciate, you know, those animals that taught that to me.
Thanks, Ivy. Ted, do you have anything?
I've had a few awful ones that it's hard to pick one as the worst. And I knew just about everyone's would be a runaway. It's the most awful feeling in the world when I can't speak about oxen, but when a pair of horses have gotten away from you and they're running wild, it's just the awfulest feeling in the world. And the worst one of those that I had was happened to be at Addison County Field Days, of all places. And I was helping to unload a load of corn stalks, and the last few, you know, were too far back to reach holding the lines. So I asked a friend to stand in front of the horses. And I didn't think about that he didn't really have any horse experience, because my horses were well trained, and he was just, I thought all they needed was a body in front of them and they were going to know and not go anywhere. And one of my horses is so smart. He's way too smart. And that last bundle of corn went off the wagon, and somehow he knew it. And he just started to step forward. And the guy I'd asked to stand in front of them saw him step forward and stepped out of the way. Instead of stopping him, he just stepped out of the way. And off they went. And it ended up okay. We got them. They actually got tangled up and went down. They went in a big circle, got tangled up and went down. And a guy much younger and faster than me running towards them said, "Is it okay if I cut the harness?" And I said, "Yeah, go ahead." And he got there way before I did. And all he did was cut all the lines. All my lines were cut into little pieces, but it didn't do anything to get the horses free. But it was so traumatic that I didn't think I'd ever take my horses out in public again, but I did get over it enough to do that eventually. I'll say that a lot of young people, or a lot of people that I've helped get started, I don't think people have runaways at first. They're really careful, but then there comes a time when you get really confident in yourself and your horses, and that's when maybe you let your guard down a little bit. And that was kind of the case there. I had total confidence in them, and that as long as he stood in front of them, they'd be fine. And you have to be forever vigilant.
Thank you, Ted. Since you asked worst day, John, you know, I've had, my steers, both pairs of cattle ran away once, and I've been bucked off a two-way plow a couple of times and had a couple walkaways. And even just last week, my leg was pinned between the evener and the forecart because I was too lax. But I have to say my worst days were days where I let the unaddressed issues of other relationships, humans mainly, get to me. And I had moments where I was not the teamster I wanted to be, and it brought a lot of shame. And sometimes I could keep myself in check, and other times I just created a bad day. But in order to get paid, I had to keep doing my work. So there were days where I just let other relationships into my quiet time with horses. It affected it too much, and so there, I guess that's, completely human error. But those are probably some of my most shameful, worst days, were when that was happening. Are there any other questions?
Can I just
Stories?
follow
We're
all
over
those?
time, but everyone's welcome to stay and talk.
Lizzie's got her hand up.
Was that John talking?
Thanks, John. I
John?
was wondering, as everyone was talking about their worst days and runaways, not just getting through that moment, but the rebuilding. I guess my question is about rebuilding confidence, and also the getting away from the catastrophizing. I jump in on the runaway. I had one runaway 8-9 years ago, and I still, like, if I go back there in my brain, I was at someone else's farm, where my horses were. He had little kids. The little kids were inside. Everything was fine. No one got hurt in that runaway. But I still have this like horror of, what if his children had been outside? What if his children had been outside? And 8-9 years later, I'm still having trouble working through that. So I'm curious for other, like Riva, you were talking about needing, confidence being shaken and needing to rebuild. How do you get that level of emotion back into, okay, moving forward? Okay, I learned from that. How do I keep going?
Two parts. I do something called releasing, which I would love to do with you to actually get through the trauma in the body. But in terms of it's the old one of getting back on the horse. And I think the problem that I had, which I think a lot of us have, was there was no one around to get back on the horse with me, so to speak. In other words, and I've read a fair amount since then, and it's doing it again, and when it comes up, having a way of letting it go, staying in present, letting it go. I never had a chance to get back on the horse because there wasn't anybody to be with me. So I haven't been back on a manure spreader since then with that particular horse. But anyways, releasing the fear and releasing the picture and the trauma in terms of emotional releasing is a way to do it that has nothing to do with horses.
And I just want to speak to that as an example. Down here, I had a friend who had a pair of horses, and they'd gotten into a wreck in the woods down here. There's everything: mountain lions, bears, gators, feral pigs. And anyway, she got in this bad wreck, and the people around were awful and not helpful. And anyway, we were driving, and her horses were really antsy, not behaving well, and she was really tense. And I asked her, like, what are you thinking? And she's like, oh, I'm just thinking about that wreck. And I'm like, why? And she's just nervous, all this anxiety about it. And I just asked to take the lines for a moment, and I just took the lines, and I softened my feel, and the horses immediately like took a deep breath, like, oh God, thank God. And they just, all that tension was going through those lines to those horses. And so it woke her up to her trauma and the things that she was not addressing. And she went on to get some therapy to help with that, and has done, much better since then. It can be, yeah, it can be really hard on our brains, some of the things we go through, and it's okay to get help. John, did you want to address something?
It goes in, I was sort of just wanting to follow up and say thank you to everybody that shared those stories about runaways, because of the fact that they're really traumatic to all of us. And sometimes those stories can be really hard to tell, because standing in front of people and saying that I have messed up in this world, or I've put animals in situations that make me feel like a terrible person, is really hard to face. And yet it's a part of what we do, is to allow animals to be in situations where we trust them, and they trust us. That's what, to me, the dynamic between animals and the Teamster is trust. It doesn't rely on an alpha or a beta, in any regard. It's all pressure and release, and it's all a communication between the two. And in some of the times where I've been in having the worst days and having some of the worst wrecks, which in my opinion sound way worse than anything that I've heard today, what came to me in that process is through mentorship, through people to talk to, I was exposed to the idea that these things happen, and often they feel the worst to us. And from an outsider's perspective, or from someone that's been in the game for so long, it comes, it happens, you move forward, and generally the animal meets you exactly the same way the next day. Like, they look at you in the same trusting, in the same level of trust and relationship that you had with them the day before, before it happened. And when you kind of get to that place where you allow that, it solves these problems of keeping your mind on something that's in the past. You're meeting the animal where they're meeting you, which is in the moment. And when you're doing a good job, you're in the zone and you're not thinking about those other things. You're not thinking about much of anything, and it can be releasing to societal reasons as well. But I guess I just wanted to appreciate everybody for sharing it, and also say that anybody that has those feelings of being nervous about sharing bad stories, like, know that there's everybody or anybody in the circle that could say, yeah, that sounds terrible, and worse things have happened. And those people that have had worse things happen continue to be, and now they're the people that you look to for mentorship. So it's all a part of the journey, and it's all part of the process. Is kind of what I've taken from my own time and being a Teamster.
Thanks, John. Tim.
Hey, good points, John. I think you're not in this for long before something happens that you regret. And I think the really hard part is that you feel like not only have you maybe let yourself down by not meeting your own expectations, but you've let the team down. You've let your team down. And that's kind of a hard thing to deal with. And I think they do meet you the next day. I had my probably worst day was last fall. I had a fairly young team that I hadn't worked single, and I had used one a couple times, and then I was going to go back and haul some stuff. Actually, it was one of those little sleds, ice fishing type sleds. I was going to haul my saws and stuff back to where some other stuff was. So I had quite used to just driving from behind and being quite relaxed. Well, I had a little bit of a long chain on that sled, plus I had the sled, and we turned a corner around the corner of the fence, and when we did that, it caught the edge of that sled, the nylon rope, and then he kind of jumped and it stretched it out and broke that sled, and that came off and it really startled him, and he started to run. And then the single tree started banging him on the, on the back of the legs, and he ran as far as he could, way to the back of the woods. I thought he was going to go out. I didn't know where I was going to find him really, but he finally stopped because all the tack, all the stuff just kind of disassembled itself and stopped beating him up. And he was just standing there waiting for me. But the reality of it is, now I've scared him with this, a relatively new task, and I've scared him. So I've been working to get that back and rebuild that trust, and that's very disappointing. To me, it's disappointing that happened, but I feel quite bad that he's, if he's afraid, he's wondering about that trust that I want to establish. So, that's hard part. That's hard, to do that, and that's kind of a little bit heartbreaking, I think, for people that really respect their animals and want them to trust that we're going to do the best for them. So we all get humbled sooner or later, I think. Certainly not the first time, but that was probably one of my greatest regret, that I just wasn't paying attention on that. I was just taking it for granted and not really paying attention. I saw it about to happen. I hoped it didn't, but it did. And then it was all downhill from there. So there you go. We're working on it. We'll get back there.
Thanks, Tim. Jay?
Just a quick comment about the animal's ability or willingness, even eagerness to forgive. Forgive me for the kinds of things that have just been talked about. The foolish things that I didn't know any better when I was, out for a drive with my first team, and I had done something, so I'd put the lines down, and when I picked them up again, I had them backwards, and I wasn't paying attention. And so why were they turning the wrong way? I mean, what's wrong with you? Well, it wasn't them, it was me. And yet they were trusting, and they continued to be, as long as I paid attention. And so I don't need to. That's why I'm still doing it.
It's a great point, Jay. I know the way I see it is that these horses, they're so present, and they're really just constantly looking for harmony. I don't know that they necessarily forgive like this human thing, but they're always wanting to go back to harmony, which is why they can be so forgiving, and they can be trained in all these different methods and ways, as many ways as there are people that work with them, and that trying to get back to being in harmony with us, with the surroundings, with everything is I think why we can repair and rebuild that relationship so quickly at times. Some can go through something really crazy, like falling down, backing up a hill or something, and and you have to even get them up with a skid steer, with no harm, but you harness back in and they're back to work. Just thanks for helping me up there. Well, and it's your job to try to make sure that doesn't happen again. But they can be so forgiving. So for folks that find themselves in a situation like that, where there's been a really intense situation, just go back to the simplest thing you can do, whether it's just standing there, appreciating each other, brushing them, whatever. Like, just find the simplest, most basic thing and start from there, is the advice I can give. Yeah, if you can just go back to zero and start over. Sometimes you can go right back into it easily, and sometimes it may take you a little while for both of you to shake it off, but repair is possible, because they're always looking for harmony, and yeah, that's just the amazing gift that they give us, and if we can reciprocate that, they'll be there for us. Tony.
Yeah, well, I guess, I've certainly had a few times that didn't go the way I'd have liked them to. And getting in a position where you can ground drive them in a relatively enclosed space, just so you get a sense of the lines and they get a sense of the lines again after a mishap, seems to me to be one way to start to rebuild both your confidence and theirs. But doing something, that's relatively safe, to get back into it. But I think getting back at it as quickly as you can. My first sort of really exciting experience was when we were just learning to work with horses, and a fellow who'd encouraged me came out, and I was trying to do some disking, and the horses were seesawing and they weren't really pulling together. And he came back, and I thought he was going to share with me some words of wisdom. And instead, he was a big guy, and he just whacked the younger mare on the butt, and she took off. And I hadn't really had good hold of the lines. We got to the end of the little field, and I bounced off the disc, and they went down one corner of the field and then down, and eventually got snarled up in some trees. And we walked down, tied the lines back on, and ground drove them back up. And it was a real eye opener to me about first how relaxed he was about this whole process. And it would have really been nice if he told me what he was going to do before he did it, and I had the lines under control. But continuing to work with them and not getting too focused on what could have happened, if it wasn't a disaster, total disaster. If nobody got hurt or only marginally hurt. I've had a dislocated arm. I've had some broken ribs over the years when things didn't go the way they should have. But there's an awful lot of joy to be had in holding lines and working with animals. So, but getting back at it and in a place where you feel relatively secure and safe, I think is what I would say in terms of getting back, holding the lines and ground driving someplace where they can't go racing away, small paddock or a barnyard or something where you can practice turning and practice stopping and just get back to a sense that you're communicating with each other effectively.
Great points, Tony. Thanks for sharing that. We've got 5 minutes to 9. Does anybody else have anything pressing? I feel like we could just sit here and chat till midnight because you're all so wonderful. But is there anything else pressing before in the next 5 minutes here?
Just thank you, because you all are my resources, and gratitude to Erica and DAPChat, and for all of you for being there for us.
Yeah, I'd like
Yes.
to say thank you to Erica for putting this together too, and also let Jay know that I've still got his blanket. Might get it
All right.
back one day.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, I want to thank Riva and Ted and Jay and Ivy and Ray for doing this, for participating in the roundtable, and I want to thank all of you for showing up. It's there's no other group out there like it. I really love you guys. Yeah, and I want to say too, like, if anybody needs help or needs someone to talk to, just reach out. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to DAPNet. However, if we can connect you with someone that can help you, or one of us has the time to talk to you, you know, we're here to, it's an educational organization, but we're here to support each other. We can't succeed as a group without, you know, giving each other a hand up now and then. So yeah, we're here for each other. So, any other parting words?
Have fun.
Have fun. Yeah, it's not all about Rex. Like, there's good days too. We should have an opposing best day ever DAPChat. Although it's so hard to pick. So,
There
all
are
right,
a
everybody.
lot more good days than bad days with horses.
Oh, for sure, for sure. But being able to bounce back from those bad days is helpful, very helpful. So, check out the chats before you go. We're going to be posting that list of resources, probably on Laura, probably have it on the website. We'll put it on Facebook. She's already made a document. And Ivy's given her email address in the chat if anyone wants to, need someone to talk to. And I'm always up for talking, especially when I'm working in the winter and the summer. If you're insomnia, it's 2 a.m. I'm working. So, and I'm by myself working, and I love to chat. So, yeah, you never know. So don't be afraid to reach out to each other. And with that, I think we'll say good night, everybody.
Good
Except
night.
John. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.